All right. Hi, everyone. I'll start by introducing you.
Sounds good.
Okay. A.T. Greenblatt is a mechanical engineer by day and a writer by night. She lives in Philadelphia, where she's known to frequently subject her friends to various cooking and home brewing experiments. She's a graduate of Viable Paradise 16 and Clarion West 2017. Her work has won a Nebula Award, has been in multiple years' best anthologies, and has appeared in Uncanny, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and Clarkesworld, as well as other fine publications. Thank you so much for joining me here tonight.
Thanks for having me. And I apologize, I should have asked this before, but how do you pronounce your last name?
Dietz.
Dietz. Okay. So, Maddy Dietz is a 17-year-old Shakespeare performing lesbian author from St. Paul, Minnesota. She is an award-winning poet and alumni of Alpha Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Workshop for Young Readers, with work published in Parsec Inc.'s Triangulation, Dark Skies anthology. Maddy founded 2 press corps for Girl Scouts councils in Minnesota and in her former home of Central Texas to give girls more opportunities to explore and use their voices by creating original media. Passionate about providing children with the kind of opportunity she desires, she has also developed and led numerous poetry and prose writing workshops for elementary school age students. These materials are being expanded into free kits for nonprofit organizations and after-school programs. An award-winning debater, Maddy has served as a guest host on multiple episodes of Smash Boom Best, Minnesota's public radio debate podcast for children. That is a very impressive resume.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I wasn't sure how to write my bio, so I packed it all in, maybe a little too much.
That's okay. Much more than I did at 17. I was just reading books.
Reading is good. Reading is collecting information and gaining obsessions about things. That's wonderful stuff.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and start diving right into the questions, if that sounds good to you.
That sounds great.
Wonderful. Okay. So first and foremost, congratulations on your recent Nebula Award. That is so exciting. I was wondering what first sparked your idea for the interstellar world of Give the Family My Love.
So it's funny because I started, it was like a 3 or 4 year process from first draft. It wasn't even first draft. It was like first half draft of that to final product. So I'm a little bit fuzzy on what the initial core idea was. But I remember I was heavily influenced by reading Kelly Link's, now I'm blanking out. Of course I am. Short story collection. Not Magic for Beginners, but Get in Trouble by Kelly Link. And the combination of witnessing some environmental degradation, some of the big forest fires just started around that time, and just a sense of hopelessness. And I wanted to kind of try to express my very complicated feelings about the future. So how I saw the future. So yeah, I think that was kind of what the initial core was. I don't remember why I decided to have someone walking across a desert landscape counting down, but yeah, so
it made for a beautiful opening, so it definitely worked.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to write. Yeah.
Do you find that writing those stories sort of helps you come to terms with the future, or do you think it kind of rises your anxieties?
While writing it, it definitely rises my anxieties, and I think that's why it took so long. Once I have it done, though, it kind of articulates what I'm trying to say, so kind of start thinking about the next question. I don't know if the anxieties ever go away completely, because especially now, especially this year, it's starting to feel
Absolutely.
a lot more real. And I really wished it was alien technology with all the answers, but we don't have it, so we have to find the solutions here.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was wondering, what do you hope readers will take from Give the Family My Love?
Um, I hope they walk away with a lot of hope. Or, yeah, I mean, hope but with a grain of salt. Because hope by itself is not enough. It has to be followed with some sort of action. And I'm a big advocate of trying to do small things, even if you don't think it's making much of a difference. My friend described it really well, I guess about a year ago, that we can try to do something environmentally friendly, but people always come back with the argument well, you're wearing a leather belt, so why are you vegetarian type of thing. And we forget that perfection is the enemy of good, and the fact that doing something small to help is actually going to add up if a lot of people do it, which is a roundabout way of saying I hope that story resonates, but also encourages people to make small changes that they want to see in the world and not give up.
That's fantastic. Yeah, not giving up is very key.
Yeah.
So you're an incredibly prolific short story writer. What do you think the form of short stories brings to the table that other forms don't?
So I love short stories. I think, I feel like even as a teenager, I was always fascinated by them. Which is not to say I was a prolific reader of them. I would just come across them. But I think sometimes they could introduce you to writers of world or something without needing to sit down and commit to something. So I think one of the biggest advantages of short stories that I bring to the table is that they're accessible. I mean, you could read them, in an hour if you're a slow reader, or depending how long the story is, or you could read it on a commute. You can you don't have to if you have a short attention span like I did as a kid, it was manageable. So everyone always talks about how it's a great place to experiment and learn new things, and that's all true. Short stories are a great experimentation laboratory, if that makes sense for a writer. But I think we also forget that they, if you are not a novelist naturally, or don't think of big stories, or you're just trying to figure this writing thing out, it's much more accessible to try to get published as a short story writer first, or even just get feedback, because a big thing about writing that people don't always talk about is you need a support group. You need a good critique group. You need friends who will talk you down from creative cliffs when you're stuck and you hate everything you've ever read, and why did you think this was a good idea? And at least in my experience, it's been easier to do that as a short story writer than talking about someone's novel, which people usually spend months, if not years, working on. So I think short stories are very powerful form. And I also, I was actually talking to someone last night about this, but I think they kind of start planting the seeds for the next big topics of discussion, or what people are going to be, themes people are going to be thinking about and writing about in future years in novels, because I feel like a lot of people start with short stories to try to talk about that, and you can see the transitions into novels and novellas and stuff like that, and in like 10 years, not 10 years, but 5 years or so. So I think I would like to say the seeds of change start with short story, but that's not always true. There's definitely a lot of exceptions to that rule.
That's still like such an astoundingly interesting idea. And yeah, I can definitely I've seen that happen with certain subjects. Yeah, that's so interesting. Gosh,
So
I never thought of that before.
Yeah, I
But,
have a
yeah.
question for you though. So are you a short story reader? Do you read everything? Do you what made you want to go to alphas?
Yes, I read a lot of short stories. I do like to read a little bit of everything, but being a high schooler kind of limits my time. And
Yeah,
I
of
do
course.
have a really short attention span as well.
Yeah.
So short stories have definitely been a solace and a joy for me. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to attend Alpha, because I had been reading many genre-focused short stories. So I find particular big fan of sci-fi. And so I went to the Alpha Writers Workshop. I got to meet other writers who were writing and reading the same things I were, and different things, and were able to give me suggestions of what to read. And like you said, that community, that support group is so vital. And it was such a joy to get
Yeah,
to connect with that group.
yeah. I mean, I feel like it's not talked about so much, because writing is always depicted as a solitary thing, and it's true, but it's also really not true, because I mean, most nights I'm sitting by my computer by myself typing. So yes, it is lonely, but I'm also online with friends who are also writing. So it's, even though we're not in the same physical space, there's I the last couple of years I've had several communities of people just getting together every night and writing, and not even planned. It was just we all kind of logged in at the same time every night, and we, all trying to get through the thing. And I've made some incredible friends actually through that, and a lot of them are like, it's been fun to see, because we were all working on stuff, and some of them have novels out now, and some of them are up for major awards, and but it was those nights together that we were just working on. And I think that's also the power of workshops as well. I went to two. I went to Viable Paradise. I don't know, like 8 years ago now, which is strange. It doesn't feel that long. Yeah, and I was really young. I was only writing for about 2 years. I was about 25 or so. Uh, so I was like, I felt like I didn't belong there at all. I don't think I had a professional sale. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go here and learn how to write. And that's now like, I got good suggestions, I got great feedback. I still use even to this day. But what I walked out of there was with a community of people. Um, and a friend from there was like, "Oh, you should come to a convention with me." I was like, "What's a convention?" She's like, "Oh, I think you like this." So we went to our first convention like together, and it was a great way to go to a convention. If uh, like newer writers always ask me, "How do you get into that?" I'm like, "Take a friend," because it's less scary to go with someone. yeah, which is a long rambling way of saying find your people. It takes a while, but and workshops are great for that. Well, can be great for that. It's not guaranteed.
Yeah, that's absolutely crucial. I agree. Finding your people is wonderful. Mm-hmm. Slightly different question for you. You've got a super interesting range of interests like cooking, home brewing, that is fantastic, and mechanical engineering. How do you think all those sort of come together in your writing? Do your interests influence your work?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like life feeds writing, and so but what I mean by is in order to have good art, you have to live, and because you find inspiration in the weirdest places, and when you're not looking for it always, and it's especially if you step outside of the community you built around writing. If you step outside, there's a whole other world and other people who never wrote never read a short story in their lives, but they have all these other perspectives. So I things like that definitely like leach in. I noticed when I guess I started writing the same time I started my engineering job. So I got right out of college. I was very bored all of a sudden because I went from this really busy student that like barely had time to read to all of a sudden, you work 50 hours a week and you're done. You have to do something else during that time. So I started about the same time. But what I found when I was getting better at writing and also getting better at engineering, some of the terms and some of the ways you would describe things, and the way characters would put things together started to be much more like an engineer. And I found that even the way I structured stories became a lot more like a puzzle sometimes, which was it's always a lot of fun. But I remember I had a rough draft of it was a story from 3 years ago, and yet, which is a haunted house story that different rooms did different things and time got funky. My friend came up to me after he read like the first draft, and he was like, I'm an engineer. When I think of a story like that. So yeah, I mean, I am a big fan of doing lots of different things, learning random stuff. I have yet to include homebrewing, but I do have a story in the back of my head about that. And yeah, I mean, I'm a big proponent of reading as widely as possible too, because you see just how I describe it as there's like a lens shift of different genres. Like science fiction, fantasy tends to focus a lot on the world usually, or there has to be some explanation of how the world works, and there's very much a cause and effect type of thing. And I remember reading I guess like a snow apocalypse book. It must have been 4 or 5 years ago at this point. It's like the whole premise of the story was like everything just got really, really cold. Like, and it was very much focused on beautiful language. And I remember there was a scene where they go to the van. It's like minus 40 or something, and the van starts no problem after like 2 days of that.
That's so weird.
I'm like, see, on a fantasy and science fiction would never let that slide. But the literary people don't care about that, and it's fascinating to read the different genres to see which one is focused on different things, because it's not readers are not the same. So yeah, I mean, I think that also. I think about that a lot. I don't think I've pulled it off quite yet of shifting my own lens and my own fiction away from science fiction fantasy. But I would like to. It's a future challenge for myself.
I'll be excited to see what you do in the future. And honestly, just like bringing those like varied perspectives from different genres to science fiction is a beautiful, wonderful thing. So that's to be celebrated in and of itself.
Yeah, and it realizes when you read so much of a certain thing, you realize there's certain things you take for granted, and then by reading outside, you realize, oh, not all readers kind of think like this. And I mean, I always just love other stories also. So I enjoy almost everything I read, even if I don't like the book. If that makes sense, there's very few books I ever regret reading. So yeah,
I feel the same. It looks like we've got a question in the Q&A here that we can touch on briefly.
Sure.
Michelle Steiner said, both panelists, do you have a home convention for speculative fiction / genre fiction that you never miss or try not to?
Would you like to go first?
Sure. My answer is pretty simple. This is the first con I've ever been to.
Oh, welcome. That's
yeah,
awesome.
thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's definitely an odd way to go to my first con, but I'm excited I was able to, even in this hectic year.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing about this is it's made it a lot more accessible for people to go to cons they wouldn't normally go to. I mean, I've been meaning to come to this one. It's just usually in a time of year where, like, the Baltimore Book Festival is usually this weekend or the weekend before, and Capclave, which I usually go to as well. I'm based in Philadelphia, so it's up and down 95 for me. I don't have a home con per se. I mean, I think Capclave is kind of the closest one that I would call home con, but I dearly love ReaderCon, which happens in Boston in July. It's usually over my birthday too, which makes it fun just to be hanging out with friends and talking about writing stories and stuff like that. My birthday is always fun. But it's also a very good convention for those of you who are interested in more the craft side of writing. It's there's like no cosplay. The dealer's room is all books type of thing with some jewelry. And there's a lot of panels about craft and stuff like that. But it's a lot of fun. A lot of good people go there. So
That's wonderful. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. If you want some recommendations for con, I'll give it to you right here. If you're in St. Paul, there is 4th Street Fantasy. Have you heard of that one? It's in Minneapolis. It's a great one-track con. It's like 200 people. Which means like everyone gets going to the same panel and talking about the same stuff, but it's also small enough that you're not like overwhelmed. I mean, I got used to like the cons in a couple hundreds, 1,000 most. And I went to Worldcon for the first time in Dublin 2 years ago, I guess now. I was like, oh my God, this is so much bigger than anything I'm used to. Like, what do you mean I have to wait in line to get into a panel? But that was an experience too. But yeah, Recon and Capclave is basically my answer.
Thank you so much for the recommendations. I really appreciate that.
I'm sorry, just reading the comments for a second.
No worries.
Capclave. It's in outside of Washington, D.C. I'll type it out. Yep, that's it. And it's happening in 2 weeks virtually.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm so glad they were able to transfer to a virtual format. That's lovely.
Yeah, I'm glad a lot of cons were able to do that this year. I think I would feel very lonely about it. So
Yeah, something would be missing from the year, that's for sure. All right, I've got another question for you, mostly because I've heard such different answers from every writer I've asked. What is your editing process like?
So I hate writing first drafts, like, so much. I know so many people who love it. Like, let me just write first drafts all the time. I hate it. It's something about the blank page for me that I'm like, oh, I gotta make something on here. That's like pulling teeth. So yeah, I dislike first drafts. I like editing a little bit more, but I'm really stressed out editing too. But I'm the type of writer who usually needs to do a lot of edits. Anywhere from the minimum I've ever done, and this is actually kind of recent, is 3. The maximum I've done, dozens and dozens and dozens together, right? I recently, guess about a year ago now, so not that recent, but I finished a novelette, which is actually an Uncanny, that I jokingly, because I put my revisions next to the name, like, V4, V5, I put V5 million. Just because, yeah, it was, there were a lot of revisions on that one. There was a long journey to trying to just get that one right, figuring it out. And I could tell you, because most of the time for me, it's I'm too ambitious. So I'm always trying to write stories that are like outside my skill level. So it'll take me many years to get right, until I develop the skills to actually tell the story how it needs to be told. So Give the Family My Love was 4 years. And yeah, I write a draft, I send it to a critique group. I have a really excellent one that we've been together for 6-7 years now. It's been a while. And they are great. They are all extremely talented, extremely supportive, very honest. Like, we'll call each other out on, like, yeah, the joke is like, yeah, your writing is beautiful, but here are all the problems. So yeah, I mean for me it's yeah, it's a lot of try again, partially because I'm experimenting, partially it takes a while sometimes to get it right. Like I usually have the structure down on the first draft. The arc of the story very rarely changes. Like with this Uncanny story is told in episodes, and that's actually never changed throughout all the drafts. So much else has changed, but that structure and that general arc of the story never changed, which is very interesting to me. But I don't know. I don't know if that's just a rigidity in my thinking. Like, I stuck on an arc and I can't change it much after the first draft, but I don't know. One day I'll experiment with completely changing a structure after the first draft, but for the most part, all the drafts after my first draft is basically trying to earn my ending. Because for a long time I had beginnings down like no problem. I love beginnings. And it's the rest of the story I had trouble with. And I realized at some point that I had two big problems. One was pacing and one was endings. And pacing I figured out how to fix first. But endings are really, really hard, even now. And I've come to realize that my process of revisions is basically earning my ending. So that usually means adding more emotions, or adding more details, like tweaking the tension, tweaking some of the motivations. Yeah, so it's a process for me. It's a lot of work. I the engineers in my life are like, oh, you make a couple $100 a story. That's pretty good. I'm like, yeah, but if you count all the hours I put into it, it's less than minimum wage. It's not. I'm not doing this for the money, type of thing. I think the misconception also is that, oh, you got it right on the first try. Not even close. Not even close. I wish I did, but yeah.
Absolutely. I do think it's funny how people think that being paid a few hundred for a story is this incredible thing. This one story I got published in Triangulation, Dark Skies, I was paid like a few $100s for it, and I was very, very happy, very excited, and I told all of my friends about it, and they were like, wow, that's awesome. You're going to be like living as a writer the next thing you know. And I'm like, well, I did the math, and I got maybe $5 an hour, so
Yeah.
no. It's
are you
go ahead.
who drafts a lot?
Yes, yeah, I do a lot of drafts. Very few drafts escape the autoclave that is my like reading over stuff and trashing it. And then from there, like you, it's tons and tons of edits, and endings are the hardest for sure. I
Yeah.
assume I'll write an ending that I'm like actually satisfied with by the time I'm 75.
Maybe not at all, but they're really hard. One trick someone did tell me that made it kind of click for me was like, your ending has to be as emotionally and fine crafted as your beginning. So that for me, I go over my beginnings like 5 billion times because I like beginnings. I like creating them, and someone was like, endings have to have the same level of craft and attention to detail and emotional impacts as your beginnings. I was like, oh, that's why I'm going wrong. It didn't quite solve all my problems, but it kind of, I think it upped it. Once that clicked for me, it kind of upped the game a little bit.
That is so helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, try it. I always say all writing advice is bullshit unless it works for you, in which case go for it. Because there's a lot of advice out there and it works for some people and doesn't work for other people, and there's nothing wrong with you if anything I'm saying here that's advice. If it doesn't work for you, just ignore it. It's fine.
That is a very good way to both like give advice and take advice. That's wonderful. Yeah. Related to my last question, what's your drafting process like? Do you have a specific way you like to write? Any environment setup that you prefer?
let's see, I'm pretty chaotic. um, maybe that comes with having a bigger family. Who I'm actually with right now, and I'm really surprised you can't hear people and dogs running around in the background. So I got into the habit of like pretty much being able to write in most environments. The kitchen table in my family's house is not a good place to write. That's one of the only places I really can't write. So and I joke, but it's not really a joke, that the only way I get drafts done is with a deadline. And I particularly agree for that, because you promise you have an audience, and audience, but you promise to have something to people by this day, so you can't procrastinate any longer. And for me, I usually, especially after the first draft, I usually wait anywhere from like a couple weeks, a couple months, sometimes a couple years to go back and revise it. There's always a little bit of waiting time, with the I wouldn't say with the exceptions, but I find as I get closer to the final draft that the waiting time shrinks down, because I am able to kind of, at that point I figured out what the story is, what it needs to do. This less subconscious work that I think going from first draft to second draft to second draft to third draft happens for me. Like I usually, something will click for a story for me when I am taking the dog for a walk, and sometimes I have to walk many miles for it to click. Like with Give the Family my love, the last weekend I was revising that, I think it was a pretty quick turnaround. It was one of those exceptions that I gave to my critique group. They made suggestions, and there was a piece missing. I don't remember what that piece was at this point, but it was one of those weekends. It was very cold. It was January or something, and there was an ice storm predicted, and it was like a -17 wind chill. But I had my dog and my mom's dog. One's a 55-pound Labrador, one's a 65-pound German Shepherd. I can't walk them at the same time. They, especially not if there's icy at all. So I ended up going for lots and lots of walks around my neighborhood, because I had to do double the walks. But it ended up being one of the most useful thing, despite me freezing, because I figured out a lot of the missing pieces of my story in those walks. So yeah, I think stepping away from drafts is also just as important as drafting. And yeah, because ideas find you kind of in quiet moments.
Yeah, letting your subconscious work in the background to make all those connections is so
Yeah.
important.
I don't know about you, but I like when something clicks like that, I'm like, why couldn't you have told me this like 2 years ago?
Like I was waiting.
Yeah, you clearly figured this out subconscious a while ago.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got another question in the Q&A here. How do you handle any story ideas that you don't feel ready to take on yet? Do you hold off or just go for it?
That's a good question. Depends what I'm working on, I think, because I feel like if I'm working on a project and I have a really I was like, I don't know how to do this yet, or like usually it's not because I always think I'm qualified to write these stories before I am, which is why it takes me so long. But I have a couple ideas that's been sitting in the back of my head for years because it's missing this one idea, and I always say stories are 5 ideas all coming together. So I'm waiting to find a second or third piece of those ideas. But yeah, for stories I don't feel qualified to write, I try to write anyway. Because I've said this a few times during this convention, but the most important thing you can do as a writer to get better, in my experience, is push yourself to try new things and fail, which we all hate doing, but it is so important because we learn so much more from something that doesn't work than the things that do. So, I mean, almost everything I have published, I've failed at writing at some point, like in an earlier draft. And I can point to the novel Uncanny that I thought I had written, and I sent it out. And it got nice personals, and I was just like, what's wrong? And I couldn't let the story go, so I put it in a drawer for probably about 3 or 4 years, and then went back to it last year. And it was like, oh, I was not leveled up enough to write this story. So yeah, the way I handle things I'm not qualified to write is try to write anyway. But also, it's come with a little bit more experience that, like, if it doesn't work, that's okay. Just don't send it out yet. Just working on those things, working on those skills. I'll be waiting for you when you're ready.
That's wonderful. It really like takes the pressure off to know that like a story will be there for you when you can return to it. Yeah.
Right. And you can also cannibalize ideas. That's the other thing. Like, if this story doesn't, I've had I don't know, a bunch of stories that, like, I'm like, oh God, I'm never gonna come back to this. I worked really hard on it, but it just doesn't work. And I've taken the ideas I've liked out of it, pieces I've liked out of it, and put in other stories that I think do much better. It works much better. So
Wonderful.
yeah, hopefully you guys find it helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question. So I'd like to ask, your How to Send Your Disabled Protagonist on an Adventure in 7 Easy Steps essay was absolutely fantastic. And that's in the Uncanny magazine's Disabled People Destroy Fantasy, in case the attendees want to go check it out, if they haven't already. You mentioned briefly on your website that being able to be sarcastic in this essay made it far more enjoyable than school essays. Not a very high bar, but still wonderful. And a lot of your writing uses that like wry sarcasm. So I'm wondering how you think humor aids your message as you're writing.
Yeah, I mean, I was the type of student that just truly hated writing essays. And I remember getting into argument with the English teacher I really, really liked. She was great about starting sentences with and and but and stuff like that, and breaking all those grammar rules. I'm like, why? It sounds natural. And she's like, no, you can't do that. And I do it all the time now. So that I think it's like a freedom of voice that I really enjoyed that. But some comedians say this, that they're able to talk about difficult things through humor because we're much more accepting of things when we're laughing. So you're able to talk about some really scary emotions or difficult stuff, or characters who are not the best people, by using humor and by poking fun at yourself, or having the characters poke fun at yourself. And also, it it kind of shifts focus a little bit away from the big plot things, and so you could let the plot things kind of unfold and be more of a surprise. Just because the tone changes a little bit. Yeah, because humor is basically surprise. So it's a powerful tool, but it's not easy to get right, and it took me a long time to get right. But I love one of the wonderful things about being grown up and not having to do essays for school anymore is I could do whatever the hell I want. It's great. So you have that in the future.
I'm very excited.
Yeah. And you have editors that I'm lucky enough to have editors who understood exactly what I'm doing. I mean, that essay also took 3 or 4 drafts to get right. So, yeah.
Drafts are a wonderful, wonderful thing. Getting to like perfect what you're writing is so satisfying, really.
Yeah, and I think also needing to do a lot of drafts is not an indication of poor writing, which is a misconception I had when I started writing. I'm like, okay, well, I have to do 5 drafts now, but when I get better, I could do 2. And I'm like, no, that's not really the case.
Yeah, I think I've done more drafts as I've grown as a writer.
Yeah, they're powerful. Don't shy away from them.
Most certainly. All right, I think we should probably start wrapping up, but this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me here and answering all of my questions and the questions of the
It was
attendees.
so much fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I had such a good time.
Yeah, you were a very good interviewer, so thank you very much. And
Thank you.
best of luck with all your work. I'm excited to see the stuff you send out into the world. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thank you to the audience also.
Thank you all so much.
So,
All right, I hope you all have a lovely night.
yeah, and I will probably hop over to this course for a little bit.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So,
All right.
have a great night, everyone. Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye.